to take a look at 7.1. This is all about exponents. We're going to talk about positive exponents, zero exponents, and negative exponents. So we should already have an idea of what positive exponents mean. So for example, 4 to the third is really saying you're taking 4 and multiplying it together 3 times. You're doing 4 times 4 times 4, which would end up as 64. If you were doing 5 to the fourth, you'd have to do 5 times 5 times 5 times 5. You're multiplying 5 4 times. That would be 625. So when you have variables like x to the second, we just need to make sure we understand that's the same thing as saying x times x. We can't simplify that all because we don't know what x is. X to the sixth is the same thing as saying x times x times x times x times x times x. It's really multiplying x 6 times. So it's really important that we have exponents because I really wouldn't write out x times x times x times x times x. I'd rather write x to the sixth. Okay, let's talk about what happens when we have negative signs. It's important to understand that this one right here is only squaring the 4, and the negative is just in front. So what this would look like would be negative 4 times 4. So you're multiplying 4 twice with the negative in front. Okay, whereas this one over here, this one is negative 4 times negative 4. Okay, you can see that they're two different things. Because it's in the parentheses, you're taking the negative with it. Negative with the 4. So they're going to come out as two different values. So 4 times 4 with the negative in front is negative 16, but negative 4 times negative 4 is positive 16. And you can see that below. If you type it into Desmos without the parentheses, you get negative 16. If you type it into Desmos with the parentheses, you get positive 16. Okay, so it says, what would negative 2 to the fourth be? That would be 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 with a negative in front. So you're going to multiply all those two together and then put the negative sign in front. So 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 again is 8, times 2 again is 16, so this would become negative 16. So what about zero exponents? Well, anything to the 0 power is 1, except if you try to do 0 to the 0, that is undefined. Okay, so look right here, 3 to the 0 power. Anything to 0 power is 1. Negative 7x all raised to the 0 power, that is 1. Now what is tricky here, this w is being raised to the 0 power, but the 2 is not. So this becomes 2 times 1, which ends up as 2. On this one, the x is being raised to the 0 power, but the negative is not. So this becomes 1, but the negative sign comes down in front. So the answer to this one is negative 1. So the thing being raised to the 0 power turns into 1. If there's anything that's not being raised to the 0 power, it has to stay in front. Okay, and when there's no symbol, it means multiply. So this isn't 21, it's 2 times 1, which is 2. So negative exponents. If the exponent is negative, you must do the reciprocal. Okay, so it's important to remember that negative exponents do not make the number negative. Okay, if it's a negative exponent at the top, it flips to the bottom and becomes a positive. So for example, 4 to the negative 2. Okay, right now this is in the top, so I'm going to bring that down to the bottom, and you're like, well, what's in the top? Well, when there's nothing in the top, you put 1 as a placeholder. So 4 to the negative 2 will become 1 over 4 squared, which would become 1 over 16. If it's negative in the bottom, it's going to flip to the top. So right here, this 3 to the negative 2 is in the bottom, so now it's going to come to the top. When it comes to the top, the exponent becomes positive. Okay, you're like, well, what's in the bottom? Well, I don't need the bottom anymore because there's nothing down there. So this is just 3 squared, which is 9. Okay, so it says, what if there's a number in front of the negative exponent? Well, this negative 2 is only going to the x. So the only thing that goes to the bottom is this x to the negative 2. That's the only thing that goes to the bottom. The 4 stays in the top. It has to stay. Okay, so what this would look like would be 4 on top and x squared on the bottom. So the x negative 2 moves to the bottom, becomes x positive 2, and the 4 stays on the top. So I want us to simplify these things down here. So 5 to the 0 power is 1, because anything to the 0 power is 1. 3 to the fourth is really 3 times 3 times 3 times 3, which is 81. 2 to the negative 3, that's a negative exponent. So it's negative right now in the top because there's no fraction. It's considered in the top. So this becomes 1 over 2 to the third. Okay, so when you flip it to the bottom, it becomes a positive exponent. 2 to the third is 8. So this would be 1 over 8. This one is negative in the bottom, so it has to flip up to the top, which means there'll be nothing left in the bottom. So this would become 4 squared on the top, and 4 squared is 16. Now, one's kind of tricky because you see the negative sign with a 3 that has nothing to do with the negative exponent. This is considered on the top, so it's going to have to move to the bottom. So when it moves to the bottom, the only thing that becomes positive is the exponent. Only exponent becomes positive. Okay, when you flip it. So I have 1 over negative 3 squared. And if you put negative 3 squared in parentheses in your calculator, it comes out as 9 because it's negative 3 times negative 3, which is positive 9. I say now we're going to do some with variables. Okay. So over here, the helpful steps, it says first thing you should do is make all 0 exponents 1 if you have any, and then you have to flip all negative exponents. That's what we're going to be doing. So I don't have any 0 exponents in here, so I just have to flip the negatives. So the only thing that has a negative exponent is this x to the negative 4. It has to move. You got to move this to the bottom. So the 5 is going to stay, and the x to the 4th is going to be moved to the bottom. And when you move it, the exponent becomes positive. Okay, no 0 exponents in number 2, but you have a negative exponent right here. So you're going to have to move this to the bottom. So the x2 is going to stay on the top. The z to the 7th is going to move to the bottom. And when it goes to the bottom, it becomes positive, the exponent. 3, no 0 exponents, but I have a negative exponent. It's negative in the bottom, so it's going to have to move to the top. Okay, so the y is going to stay there, and the x to the 7th is going to come up and join it. Now, usually we write things in alphabetical order. So I'd put the x to the 7th first, followed by the y. Okay. On number 4, I do have a 0 exponent. So the only thing that's going to become 0 or 1 is the b to the 0, because the 0 power is not going to the a or the 4. So this thing turns into 1, and when there's no symbol, it means multiply. So this is really 4a times 1, and 4a times 1 is 4a. There's no more 0 exponents. There's no more negative exponents. This is my final answer. Okay, if I take a look at number 7, no 0 exponents, but I do have a negative exponent. The only thing that has a negative exponent is this b. So that's going to have to move. Everything else is going to stay. So the 7a is going to stay on top. The 3w is going to stay on the bottom. And the b2 is going to move down to the bottom. Now, usually we put things in alphabetical order. So I would rewrite this as 7a over, and then I'd have 3b squared w. See how the only thing that moves is the b negative 2. When you moved it, the exponent becomes positive. Okay, let's take a look at number 6. Do I have any 0 exponents? Yes. So just this thing is going to become 1. So that's going to turn into 7 times 1 for that guy, which is just 7. So I'm just going to rewrite the rest of it below here. Okay, now I got to take care of negative exponents. So this negative exponent on top has to move to the bottom. This negative exponent on bottom has to move to the top. So on the top, I'm going to have 7 with a 2 to the 1st power. So it's going to be 7 times 2 to the 1st. On the bottom, I'm still going to have the m squared, but the t to the 5th is going to come down and join it. So I moved this guy to the bottom, become positive. I moved this guy to the top and made the exponent positive. Now, the only thing left to do is the top is 7 times 2 to the 1st. Those are just numbers I can simplify. 2 to the 1st is 2. 7 times 2 is 14. So I end up with 14 m second t 5.